public. It's unlisted, so no one's actually watching. So I think this is recording now. So we're talking about, we're on week 2, and we're talking about, we're on week 3, and we're talking about getting started with Godot and GitHub and nodes and scenes and all that. So the first thing we want to do is sort of get oriented to GitHub. Does anybody know what GitHub is, right? Obviously, it's this website, but does anybody know what it is beyond that?
Open source resource sharing.
Yeah, it's an open source resource sharing service. What does open source mean? Have we talked about that yet?
Free and accessible to everyone.
It's free and accessible, and what it means even more so is that when we say open source, it's talking about the source code of the thing itself is open to the public. So open source is a movement in computers where the designers of the programs make the code that actually makes the program available to everybody. And what's wonderful about that is it means that nobody owns the programs, right? So the internet, for instance, HTML is an open source language that anyone can use, right? Nobody owns the code that is required to make a web page, right? What that means is everyone has access to it, and anyone can do whatever they want with it, right? You can feel empowered to use this tool as a creative tool. And the Godot game engine, which is the game engine we're going to be using, is a free and open source game engine. And it is... I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself, but I'll show you the Godot game engine, right? If you want to find the Godot game engine, you can scroll all the way down here to the bottom to this link, or you can just click, you can just search Godot, G-O-D-O-T, and then go to this website and download it. I believe it should be installed on all of these computers, but if it's not, you can sort of find it here at godotengine.org. And you'll see, right, your free and open source game engine. And if you go to the Contribute tab of the website, and then go to, I guess probably the easiest way to find it is to just say Godot GitHub. You'll see that here is the GitHub repository for the Godot game engine, and all these folders and all these files. This is all the code that is required to actually make the game engine, and you can just download it yourself, or you can modify it, and you can do whatever you want with it. So GitHub is sort of like Wikipedia meets Google Drive meets Facebook for code, right? It's where all of these different projects live online and are accessed online. So the Godot game engine lives online as a project that you can sort of read about and edit. And similarly, our syllabus is also just a bunch of code and files and stuff, and it's just a folder of files on this GitHub repository. So the way GitHub works is GitHub is always organized into repositories, and a repository is basically just like a fancy folder of files, right? That's all that it really is. It's a folder of files that you have access to. And our repository, which is at this website, right, and this is the name and the repository, is this folder filled with files, right? And you can see it online. Here, you can sort of see a preview of it. But you can also download it, okay? So if you want to download the syllabus, there's a couple different ways to do it. First, I'll show you the sort of quick and dirty temporary way, and then I'll show you the better long-term way. So the quick and dirty temporary way to download anything on GitHub is you just click Code, and then click Download Zip. And then you'll see that it downloads this zip file. And this is actually probably going to take a minute because there's actually a bunch of stuff inside this syllabus. There's like a lot of different code examples that I have floating around. So it's going to take a while to like zip it all together and download it. And I don't know if I want to wait for it to do that. Let's see if I've already had it from last semester. This is it from this semester. All right, we'll wait. In the meantime, while it's doing it the quick and dirty way, I'll also show you the more appropriate way to download something, right? Because what this is going to do is it's going to download this folder of files right now. But what GitHub does that's really important is it helps keep files in sync with each other, right? The thing about code and projects and stuff is that we change them a lot, right? We're always constantly like making it better or adding new features and stuff. And so when you just download a snapshot of the files, you get what they're like today. But if I were to make changes to it tomorrow, you wouldn't, the files on your computer would just be files on your computer. They wouldn't be updated, right? So in order to get like a copy of a repository that grows and changes over time, you have to do something a little bit more involved. You can't just download the zip file. You have to clone it. And cloning a repository is essentially like copying it to your computer and then making sure that it stays up to date. So I'll sort of show you what that means. So you should all have, I guess what you probably want to do is look for on your computers a program called GitHub Desktop. It's this purple program. It should be installed by default. So you can just launch GitHub Desktop. And when it launches, you should probably be prompted to log in or create an account. If you haven't made a GitHub account yet on the website, I recommend doing that now. You're going to need one for the rest of the semester, and it's how you're going to be both turning in your code projects and how I'll be grading them. Was that a question?
Yes.
Yeah. What's up?
If you have a personal one, is it better to just make a new account with the school email?
No, I think your personal one is fine. Yeah, as long as you have regular access to it. Like if you've forgotten how to log into your personal one, then you might want to make a new one. But if you have an account that you use regularly, that's totally fine. Okay, in the meantime, I'll show you that this, right, so I downloaded this zip file. I'll unzip the zip file, and you'll see that here is a folder of files, right? And this is just a regular folder of stuff. These are just literally folders of a markdown file and some PDFs and other things. And this is all the contents of our syllabus, right? You can see there's this assignments folder here, and here's the assignments folder. So again, as a GitHub repository is really just like a regular folder of files. But again, because I just downloaded this as a one-time snapshot, like if I changed anything about this, if I were to change some of the text on this README or to add new files, just downloading the regular folder of files wouldn't be up to date, right? So that's why we're taking this next step of creating GitHub accounts. So is everybody okay with the process of creating a GitHub account? Does anybody need any help doing that?
I'm downloading.
You're downloading GitHub Desktop?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so again, right on the website, when you go to GitHub, you should be prompted, you should be somewhere like here. And if you've never made an account, you're going to want to hit sign up. Or if you have made an account, you're going to want to hit sign in. And I'm going to need to sign in now with my own account. Ooh, I can do this. If you have a password, you can do that. But if you have if you have set up a passkey thing, I think you can do that instead. So I'm hoping that this makes it a little faster. Okay. Cool, look at that. But this is the same thing as sort of signing into a password or signing into a, right, I've essentially logged into my account now. And on GitHub, what you have is you have sort of a regular dashboard with any sort of like news feeds of people that you're following. And then you also have your profile. And what you can do, I'm trying to think about the order I want to do this in. I'll stay with sort of showing you how to clone the account, right? So, or clone the repository. So if I go back to the syllabus, we'll see here that I have this code button. And then we'll see that I have this option to either open it with the GitHub Desktop app or to clone it using the URL. I'm going to clone it using the URL because I find that using the Desktop app button doesn't always work. But I'm basically just copying this URL to my clipboard. I'm going to try opening it with the Desktop app, and we'll see if it works. And yeah, what it should do is it should take you to this sort of empty, big, old user interface, right? And if you don't have a thing that's popped up already, you can click this Add button over here, and you can click Clone Repository. And then this is where I'm going to paste in the URL of the repository, and I'm going to click on URL and paste it in here. And then I'm going to choose a folder on my computer of where I want to clone it to. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the desktop, and I'll clone it as class repo, and hit select. And so now when I clone this repository, it's going to copy it to this folder on my desktop. Does this make sense so far? Does anybody have any questions about any steps in this process? No? Okay. So again, right, in case we missed it, right, we click Add, you click Clone Repository, go to URL, and this is where you take this URL here, right? You click here and you get copy this URL, and then you want to paste it in here to this URL. And then if it's complaining, right, it's saying that the folder that I'm copying it to has files in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a new folder. I've already made this, that's from last time. Okay, I'll make a new folder called class repo. And then I hit select. And now you'll see it's going to, right, it's going to be on my desktop in this folder. And then I hit clone. And then you're going to see that it's going to start copying all these things down from the internet. And I'm not going to wait for that, but what that's doing is it's similar to this, right? Right. I do just have this folder here. If I go to my desktop, though, you'll see that I have this folder. I have a couple different versions of this, but this is the one I'm cloning right now. And again, it's going to take a couple minutes because it is pretty big. But has anybody had any trouble sort of creating an account with GitHub or finding the class repository?
How can we find the class repository?
Yeah, it's just a web page that you can go to. I think the shortest route is probably, you can do like, so you could just go here. You could just go to, yeah, github.com/bizarc-teaching/SVA-DSD. But I think that there's also even a bit.ly that I have, bit.ly/ I think it's SVA VGD. Does that work? No. SVA GDF. No. Oh, I remember. Yeah, you sort of do need to type it in. I think, and I'll try and make it nice and big.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you figure it out?
He's typing the link right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
This one.
Yeah, and I recommend saving this, right?
Go to the app and then create
This one.
and then URL. And then pick out folder location.
So, anybody else need any help? Yeah, what's up?
And then clone. And then now it's the second.
Yeah.
And you'll just wait till it
Okay,
copies.
this is
So we're working on this. So this is the whole syllabus.
There.
So what are you trying to do with this? Are you trying to clone the repository or? Yeah. So what we're doing is on a computer, right? Do you have a laptop or are you using one of these?
GitHub， 然后你写那个 B， 然后它就自己就跳了。
What you want to do, as long as you have that, it's okay. So if you are cloning the repository, if you're cloning the class repository right now, that's fine, that's great. We can also move on if you don't do that at the moment. So, hey guys, is everything good?
Yeah.
Great. So if you haven't been able to clone the class repository, that's okay. I recommend trying to do that over the next couple of days because you'll be able to access a lot of the course materials that way. What I will show you is that, right, once you have cloned it, you'll see that you can open it in the folder, and here it is, right? Here's the folder of files. And you'll notice that, like, let's say if I were to like change something, right? Let's say if I were to change part of the syllabus, I'll show you the syllabus right now, right? This README file is just what the syllabus is, right? So this, you can see this is the text of the file, and it gets sort of rendered and drawn up here in this sort of nice kind of fancy way, right? But so like if I tomorrow decided that I was going to change the name of the class, for instance, like if I changed it online, right, and I called it SVA cool game design syllabus and commit those changes, then when I went to GitHub, right, so we have to kind of, when you start thinking about GitHub, you need to think about how this is doing a job that is like keeping different files synchronized, right? So there's one version of the files that is on the website, on GitHub the website, right? And right now on GitHub the website, we have this change, right? I made this cool game design change, right? I added this word. But on my computer, that doesn't happen automatically, right? Because it's really important, right? Has anybody ever worked with Google Drive or Dropbox and you're like working on a project and maybe you work on it on 2 different computers and then suddenly you get like a conflict and there's like 2 versions of the file and it's like you don't know which one's the right one, right? Does that happen to anyone a little bit? That's fine when you're a human, but when you're working with code, right, that can make a computer just get totally broken, right? So when we are working with code, we have to be really specific about which version of the project we're working with at any given time. So unlike Google Drive will just mix them both together and let you figure it out. GitHub says, no, I need you to tell me exactly which version we're using right now, right? So online, I have this new version, but here on my computer, if I open this up, right, this is still the old version, right? This is not the new version yet. If I want to get the new version, I have to go to the GitHub desktop app, and I click Fetch. I say, hey, is there anything new out there? And it says, let me check. Oh, yes, there is. There's one new thing to get. And I say, okay, let's get it. Let me pull it. So I'm going to pull this down from the internet, and I pull it. And now you'll see it changed right here. See how it changed right here? This is the file locally in my computer, right? And similarly, right, if I were to add a bunch of stuff here, like, wow, I'm having a great time in class, or whatever, and I save this, I have saved this on my local computer, but it is not online yet, right? Even if we refresh the page, it's still the old version online, right? And this is, again, because we don't want everything to just automatically get changed, right? If I'm working on a project and somebody else needs the project that's the old version of the project that was working, and I'm trying to make a change to it, and I'm just editing things left, right, and center, and it just changes stuff on their computer, that might break their whole thing that's going on. So GitHub slows down the process of collaborating and makes sure that you're all on the same page. So if I'm done, right, let's say I'm really happy with these changes to my project, what I do is I go back to my GitHub project, and then I make a commit. I say I'm going to add this stuff, and GitHub shows me, right? It says, look, here are the new lines of this file that you're changing. And so I'm going to say I updated the README. I'll say changed README, and then you can describe what you changed. I added a fun sentence, right? And then you commit it, so you add it to the history of Git on your computer, and then you push it. You put it up online onto the internet. And now that I've pushed it, when we go back to GitHub and I refresh the page, you'll see here's the change on GitHub. Does that make sense? So it's sort of a slower workflow than you might be used to with Google Drive, but it's really helpful because it keeps things from getting broken or confused, okay? And I'm showing you all of this because this is how we're going to start creating digital games together. This is how we're going to be able to share our progress with each other, how you can work on something on your computer and then I can download it on my computer and I can look at it and understand it, right? So I'm just going to delete this to make it a real syllabus again. I'm going to just hit commit and push, and then that'll be fine on the thing. So part of this lab, yeah, question.
So
Yeah.
do we need to have to write the I add the fun sentence?
That's a great question. So whenever you change something on GitHub, you do have to have a summary. But if you noticed, I didn't do it, right? I was kind of lazy that time. And that's because if you only change one file, if you're just making changes to one file, like I'll do new thing, right? GitHub is smart enough to say, it'll just say it'll suggest this as the title for the change, right? If I change 2 files though, maybe I change, I don't know, I'll make a new, let's see, I'll just do Command N and save this as like cool new file. I'll save this as a cool file.txt. TXT just means it's a standard text file. And I'll just save this right into the root folder. So it should be right here now. You see I've added this file. And if we go back to GitHub, GitHub now says, okay, you're adding 2 files. Now I need you to tell me what you're doing. So now I would have to say changed file, changed readme, and added file. And you can write whatever you want here, but it is good practice to write something that you in the future is going to be able to read and be like, oh, that's what I was doing. Because a really helpful thing about Git too is it allows you to travel back in time, right? So I'm going to commit this and push this, but if I click here, I can see here's all the changes that I've made, right? Here's the change that I just made. Here's the change I made before that, and here's the change I made before that, and you can always travel back to the previous version, okay? So obviously you'll see, right, I just did these things called updates. I'm very lazy when I write my messages, but in looking at this, right, I have no idea what, like, I'm just changing the syllabus, but I could have said like, oh, this was me, changing the course code. It would have been much more helpful for me to give a handy name to these commit messages. So don't be like me, write a nice commit message to yourself. Okay, so this is right. So that's how you can clone a repository. For the Lab 1 assignment, what you have to do, you don't have to do this. You can just submit it through Canvas, but it'll be better for you in the long run if you do it this way, and you get a couple extra points by doing this. I want you to create a GitHub repository and then submit your GitHub repository with your project in it, okay? That might sound like a lot, but I'm going to show you the steps that you need to do right now in order to do that. So in order to create a new repository, just click on this big sidebar thing, right? So you should be in the GitHub desktop app. That's another thing people get confused about. There's the GitHub desktop app, and then there's GitHub the website. It's easiest to create a repository from within the GitHub desktop app. So I'm going to go to the GitHub desktop app. I'm going to click Add, and then I'm going to click Create New Repository, okay? And I am recording this already, so you don't need to film it. It's okay. But you should be able to follow along. Like, do you guys have GitHub Desktop on your computers? I think that it should be installed already. Has anybody found GitHub Desktop on the computers?
We are using our own computer.
You can use either. There should be, like, on the class computers, GitHub Desktop should be installed, so you should be able to sign in and do this process. Or you can do it on your own computers. And you can also switch computers. And you don't have to, I just, it's sometimes helpful to try and follow along. But so I'm going to create a new repository. And what I recommend that you do is you create one repository that you're going to use for all your labs. So I'm going to call this like John Bezark Labs. And you can add a description if you like. I'm going to say these are my lab for game design fundamentals. Then I'm going to pick a place on my computer where these labs want to live. And this is really important. You want to make sure you know where this is. So I like that it's on the desktop, but you could also pick any file on your computer, right? You could pick the documents folder or wherever. But I'm going to pick the desktop, and I'm going to click Open. I am going to initialize it with a README. A README file is just like a nice file of text that you can kind of write notes in for yourself or for others who are reading the project. Then this part's really important. Because we're going to be making Godot projects, I'm going to click Git Ignore, and I'm going to scroll down and find Godot. There it is. So Godot is right here. I'm going to pick Godot from this big list. This is because all these different programming languages have different types of files that they use to sort of keep track of things behind the scenes that you don't need to share with other people. It's not a problem if you do. Like if you forget to do this, You're not going to die, but it'll make your life a little bit easier if you remember to set this setting. So I'm going to hit Godot. And then finally, you get to pick a license. And licenses are important. You know, when you make something and share it online, you want to think about what the rules are for sharing it, right? If you want people to be able to do whatever they want with it and you don't care, you know, picking something like the MIT license is great. The MIT license is a good, free, and open source license that protects you as the software creator, but also allows people to use it for whatever they want. But there's a bunch of different types of licenses that you can pick from, or if you don't want to pick a license, you don't have to. But I'm going to pick MIT, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. So this is really it, right? You create the name, you pick where it wants to be, and then you pick Godot, MIT license, give it a README, but these 3 steps are less important than picking the name and picking where it is. And then I'm going to hit create. Okay. And so I have created this repository on my computer. Now I'm going to put it online on GitHub. So I'm going to hit publish. And then when I hit publish, it says, this is how it's shared on GitHub. And I really recommend that you don't make this private. I recommend that you make it public. That way it's easier for me to see it and grade it. It's easier for you to share it. But if you really want to make it private, you can. There's just another step to then inviting you to it. But I recommend making it public and then hit publish.
Why do not have the organization?
Oh, because you don't need an organization. Organizations are just sort of like another way of grouping things within your profile. Like for instance, I made an organization for all of my teaching stuff. So like I have this Bizarre teaching organization and here are all my class syllabuses. But when you're just making stuff on your own, you don't need to select an organization. That's just an optional thing if you want to associate it with those things. So I have now made it, all right, I've published it, and you can always click from GitHub Desktop, you can always click first Show in Finder, and this will open up the folder on my computer where it is, and you'll see that it's pretty empty right now, right? It's just this README, which has the name of the repository in the description, and it also has the license, which is just this piece of text, right? This is the license that describes the legality of this code. And you'll see that it is good for you, right? It's provided as is without warranty, which means that like it's good because like, you know, technically if you didn't have this, someone could maybe use your code and then have something, they could get injured and then they could sue you because your computer code, but like this basically allows you to be saying like, no, I'm not giving you any sort of thing that's gonna do anything, right? America's weird like that, but I guess everywhere's weird like that. Anyway, but that's it, right? That's all that's in this folder on my computer. And if I went to, if I clicked, I don't know what I just changed. So if you ever make changes and you don't really want to keep them, you can always just right click and say discard changes. And so I'm going to discard this change. You can also click this button. It'll take you straight to GitHub where it is online. You'll see that here it is, right? This is my repository of stuff online. Cool? And so when you're turning in your labs, all I want you to do is just take this link, copy this link, and submit this link in Canvas. And that way when I go to Canvas, I can go to this web page and I can see all your projects, okay? So that's all the sort of most boring part of the labs, right? We're not even talking about game design yet. We're just talking about how we're going to share our game design projects, right? And that might be kind of confusing. It's okay. We're going to recircle this. We're going to come back to this and try it again next week. So if you're confused, that's fine. In the meantime, though, we're going to switch gears and we're actually going to start talking about our game engine itself, okay? Well, thank God, right? We're actually going to do some game design stuff. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to show you what I would be doing. If I were trying to do this assignment, I'll show you how I would be doing it, right? So I have this folder here in my Finder, and it's empty. There's nothing in it right now, right? And so in order to create a project, a Godot project, we need to start opening up our game engine, Godot. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to open up Godot. Godot should definitely be open on these computers, installed on these computers, and you shouldn't need to do anything. You should just be able to click it and open it. If it's not, again, you can always, or you're using your own computer, you can go to godot.org. Then you can click download. And then it's going to give you options, okay? If for some reason you know what C# is and you really want to use the language C#, you can click this version. I really recommend, though, just click this blue version. This will be more than enough for whatever you need. So once you have opened Godot, right, once you've downloaded and installed it, you should see something that looks a little bit like this. It's going to look a little bit different, I think, because I already have projects on this computer. Yeah. So you should probably see something that looks like, here, let's just do this. Let's just remove all of them. Come on. Whoop. Remove. Okay, right? You should see something that looks like this, right? This is Godot. Welcome to the Godot game engine. So this is what's known as the project manager, okay? This is where you launch, this is where you either create new projects, import existing projects, or you can open projects from the asset library. And you'll notice at the top, right, we have these two big buttons. We have projects and we have asset library. If you click on asset library, you might see something that says go online, then you just click go online, and then you see this big list of sample projects. These are all things made by the community, which you're welcome to download, modify, and use yourself. And there's a lot of good examples and templates and stuff in here. Like if you want a car demo, for instance, there's a whole car demo. Or if you want a tower defense game template, right? Or if you want a city builder. There's all these really amazing templates in this in the asset library that I recommend looking at. But let's just go back to the regular project section, and I'm just going to create a new project. I'm going to call this Lab 1. Yeah, I'll call this Lab 1, and I'm going to put this inside of my GitHub repository. Okay, this part's pretty important. You want to make sure that when you save it to the same location on your computer as your repository, right? So you can always move it later, but it's easier to get it right the first time. So I'm going to hit Browse. I'm going to go to the desktop. I'm going to go to class. Nope, this is the wrong place. I'm going to go to John Bizark Labs, which there's already 2 of. Why is there already 2 of them? That's terrible. Let's figure that one out. Hold, please. Make this go away. Okay, I don't know why. There's just 2 of them. Why did I make 2 of them? That's the worst thing I've ever done in my life. Oh, maybe that's from like literally last semester. That'd be funny. I think it is. Okay, I'm gonna delete this one. And nobody got mad. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna save it to, I'm gonna create a new project. I'm gonna call it Lab 1. And I'm gonna go to Browse, Desktop, Desktop, John Bizark Labs, select current folder, and you'll see, right, it makes this nice little folder name at the end here, so it takes the project name and sticks it on at the end. So you basically just want to pick where you're saving your project. Then the next thing you get to pick is which renderer you're going to use. And you don't need to worry about it too much for now. You can always change it later. But the short answer is forward plus is for really advanced, high-end 3D graphics. So it can look the nicest, but it's also supported on the fewest number of platforms. So it works mainly on PCs, consoles, Macs, and all that. Whereas mobile, it's sort of like in the middle, and it also supports mobile devices. And then compatibility is the lowest, but it supports the widest end of variety of devices, including the web. So you can also just publish your projects from Godot directly online, and people can play your games online without even having to download anything, which is pretty cool. And we're just doing lightweight stuff today, so I'm going to click compatibility, and then I'm going to hit create and edit. And so this is going to launch the game engine for the first time. And here we are, right? We should be here in our game engine. And it's going to take a minute to load for me for the first time. So is everybody getting here okay? Is anybody having any problems with this? Any questions so far? Cool. So here we are in the game engine, right? This is this is the program we're going to be using for the rest of our lives. There are kind of 4 major areas when you're first looking at Godot to kind of think about, right? There's this main big viewport, which has obviously most of what you're looking at. Then we have this scene tree over here in the top left, this file system tab in the bottom left, and this inspector tab over here on the right, right? And these are 4 big areas to think about when you're thinking about the program. I'm going to start with the file system in the bottom left. This one's pretty simple. Does anybody guess what this is? Your file system. Yeah, this is your file system, right? So a Godot project is just a folder, and I'm going to open this. I'm going to click Open in File Manager, right? And you'll see that I have just made this folder on my computer, right? So I made this lab1 folder, and you'll see that it has this file called project.godot, and it has this icon in it. And you'll see that this folder also has this icon in it, right? And basically, this folder is exactly the same as this folder. What you see here is what you see here. So if I were to add something new to this folder, like, I don't know, let's, somebody give me an animal. Shout out an animal.
Pig.
A pig. I love that. We'll do a pig PNG. When you're working with games, PNGs are wonderful assets. Does anybody know why?
The alpha channel.
The alpha channel. They have a layer of transparency. So that means that you can bring them in and it'll look like you can more easily like collage things when you use PNGs. So how do I get PNGs again? I go to Images, Tools, Color, Transparent. So this, I mean, this is a pretty cute, that's a pretty cute pig. That pig's a little weird. I'm going with this pig. This pig I'm never going to use in my life. It's horrifying. So I'm going to drag and drop. Ooh, it's a WebP though. I wonder if that'll work. Let's see if that works. Might not work. Yeah. Oh, it did work. Okay, yeah. So right, I just dropped this picture in here, and it got added to this file system, right? So you'll see that these are basically the same, right? And I'm going to rename this to pig. I'm going to right-click and hit rename and do pig. And you'll see that when I change it here, right, it also changes the name over here, right? Or if I made a folder and called it like images, and then I dragged the pig and the robot into it, you'll see that when I go back to Godot, it's smart enough to rearrange them, right? So this folder is basically this folder. You also have these .import file, right? You have these files that are hidden over here. These are files that Godot is using to keep track of state, right? To keep track of different information about the files. You don't need to worry about these, but just notice if you're ever like, why is it that there's more files in this folder? It's because this is like metadata for the engine, okay? But yeah, so this area down here, this is basically a view into your project folder. This is where you're going to look for files and scenes and scripts and open things, right? Okay. Then let's talk about this big thing here, right? This is the viewport. It must be very enticing to want to just play around in the 3D viewport, but we're not going to do that. We're going to come back at the rest of the semester later. So if we look up here at the top, you'll see we have a couple of big views, right? We have the 2D view, which is a lot like the 3D view, except there's one less dimension, right? We also have the script tab and the asset library. The script tab is the built-in code editor that you're going to be using when you're actually coding. And the asset library is a lot like the asset library that you saw at the beginning in the project launcher, but the difference is that the asset library at the project launcher, those are more like templates and examples, and these are plugins, and these are things that actually change. They're tools that you can use in the editor itself to extend the capabilities of the editor. But you don't need to worry about that, but you can definitely explore this. Like, there's so many pages of these now. There's like 44 pages of like, however many plugins. There's a bunch of plugins. So it's definitely worth looking around in that, but we're not going to bother with that. We're going to switch back to the 2D tab. And I'm going to get you acquainted with the 2D view. So for starters, we have an axis. Can everybody see this okay? I need to make it dimmer. It's too bright. We have an axis, right? And the axis is a lot like math class, where you have a left and a right and an up and down. This is the x-axis, and this is the y-axis. There's one thing, though, that's different, right? Everybody remembers math class, how you have the grid and the axis, and you can plot things on it. It's a lot like that, except that typically in math, y is up, right? This would be, if this is 0, 0, this would be like 10, and this would be negative 10. In computer graphics, it's the other way around. You'll see here, right, this is 0, and you can see here there's a little 250. So this is 250 pixels down, and this is negative 250. This is negative 250 pixels up, okay? So that's one thing you're going to have to get used to, is when you're moving things around on the screen. It took me a while anyway to remember that, Y is always down. And the reason why that is, I think, is because back in the old-timey days of old-timey computers, when we would render graphics, you'd use a monitor that was would project line by line, a sort of CRT monitor that would scan from left to right at the top and go from top to bottom. So when you drew an image, you would go like this, and then like this, and then like this, and then like this. And so as we increase, we're adding more lines down. So you can kind of think of it like reading a book, right? So this increases in the x-axis, and this increases on the y-axis. Does that make sense? And that'll be easier to see when we actually can see something on the screen, right? We can there's lots of things you can do with this. There's this toolbar up here to help you sort of navigate this space, right? This helps you kind of drag. Well, it's really not that helpful unless we actually have something on the screen, right? But these are all tools to help you manipulate your viewport. But yeah, let's get something that we can actually reference on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this icon, this robot, and I'm just going to drag it over here. And as I'm dragging it, you'll see a couple of things. In the bottom left, you'll see this thing instantiating it at these coordinates. And even if I did this, right, I just moved it up here, you'll see that these coordinates are a lot smaller. And if I move over to the right, you'll see that the x number is getting a lot bigger, but the y number is staying about the same. If I go down, you'll see the y number, the second number, is getting a lot bigger. So that kind of gives you a clue, right? That sort of reinforces this idea that that's how this coordinate system works. But I'm going to drag this around, and then I'm just going to let go and drop it. And a lot of things are going to happen quickly. Ready? Bam! Look at that. So we've got this robot suddenly on the screen. What else changed on the screen? What was different from what we just saw?
The right side.
The right side, right? This whole side just filled in with all this information, right? I'll undo it. Right here it was nothing. There's nothing here. And then if I bring it back in, bam! Now suddenly we have all of this information. Anything else different? Do it one more time. Whoop. So this whole left side too, right? Prior to here, it says create a root node, and it's giving you an option to create some sort of root node. But as soon as I add this, we see that there's this thing icon here, and that prompt went away. And it's a little confusing. We'll get to it. But for starters, this thing on the right might be a little bit more familiar to you. This is a standard sort of like property inspector or editor. So I believe Photoshop has this, or like Figma definitely has this, right? This is this type of design pattern where if you have an element, a thing that you're editing, you can select it, and then you can change parts of its properties over here, right? But if you have multiple things, like I'll also bring this pig. Oh my God, that's a big pig, right? But if I click on the pig, you'll see that there's this pig texture property. But if I click on the robot, you'll see there's this robot texture property, right? And if I click on the transform, you'll see here's the robot's position right here, and here's the pig's position. And you'll see that they're different, right? When I switch, they're different, right? So whatever I'm currently selected on in the scene tree, these properties over here on the right correspond to the node that I have selected, okay? Okay, that'll be confusing. Don't do that. We'll make the pig go away, because I'll talk about the pig in a minute. Right, so you'll see that, already the position, you can see the position of the object right here. And you'll see that, right, as I said before, right, this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. You'll also notice you can change when you drag it this way, right? The numbers over here change, and the opposite is also true. So I can change these numbers by typing in numbers specifically, and it'll move the thing on the screen, right? And then if it was hard to find, right, you have to sort of notice, right? We have these sort of big little like, fold down UI things. So we have this sort of like foldable thing, and you just want to untoggle this transformation property category, and this shows you the position. It also shows you the rotation, so you can rotate it in radians, I think. Here, I can drag this slider and spin it around, so we can see how it's rotating. You can also change the scale of this object by making it nice and big or nice and small, right? And by default, it's all linked together, but I can unlink these two, and now it'll let me make it weird and stretched, right? But it's assuming that you don't want that by default. Any questions on any of this so far? Dancing robots. Let's say I make a mistake, like I have this horrifying thing and I don't like my robot scaled like this. I want to return it to its default state. On any property, you can always click this little arrow. And this arrow lets you return it to its default setting, right? So this is returning it to its default properties. That makes sense? You can also scale stuff by dragging these little handles. And again, I think by default, when I don't click, there's no aspect ratio or preserved. Yeah, but if I held shift, yeah, that preserves the aspect ratio. You can also turn on snapping to turn on like a grid, and that kind of makes it snap more precisely to pixels. Okay, and there's all these different sorts of settings you can fiddle with. But we only have 5 minutes left, and there's a couple key points. So firstly, there's a bunch of different properties that all of these nodes have, right? This node is called a sprite 2D. You can see its name at the top here, and it has all of these properties. It has a transformation properties. It also has visibility properties, so I can change its color by modulating it. Modulating is kind of like putting a layer of plastic on top of the thing. You can change a bunch of different things, but I'll get into the details of that later. We also have this this blue rectangle. Does anybody have a guess what this blue rectangle is? Can anybody see it? It's very faint. What do you think this blue rectangle might be? Screen. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is by default, this is the viewport. So this is what is going to be rendered on the screen when we play our game. So let's play our game now, right? So I'm going to go and hit play, and this is going to play I'm going to click this button. I'm going to click this play the current scene, okay? And this is going to prompt us to run the current scene that we're in. And I haven't even described what a scene is yet, but a scene is, well, I'm going to click this and you'll see what happens. I'm going to click this, and because it's we haven't saved our scene before, it's going to ask me to save this scene. So I'm going to call this robot. And you'll see that I created a file down here that is this scene, and we're running this scene. And you'll see that in this scene, right, the robot is over here in the window. It's on the left side of the window, and here's the window, right? Here it is on the left side of the window. And that's what this scene file is. This scene file, a scene in Godot is a file that has a collection of nodes in it that Godot then runs as can run as like a thing. Like you can use it for anything basically. But this scene is currently just this one node, right? It's just this one picture, and it has this position, right? So I'm going to run this current scene again, and you'll see there's the robot. If I were to close it and move the robot over here and run the current scene again, you'll see the robot's over here. Cool? Yeah. Like 3 minutes. The final sort of thing that I'll start throwing at you is that oftentimes oftentimes scenes are not just one node, okay? So a node is sort of like a little object that we use in a scene. It's like a noun. It's like a thing that we use to construct a scene. But many times we use lots of nodes in scenes. And the way that scenes work is that there's always one root node, and then everything else is a child of that node. So for instance, I'm going to drag this pig in here. Here's this pig. Oh my god, and the pig is demonically red. Sorry. I should have remembered that would happen. That'll make sense in a minute. But we have this gigantic evil pig. I'm going to shrink this pig down by changing its size. Okay. And you'll see, though, right, here's the robot icon. Robot. I'm going to rename this node robot. And it has a child called pig, right? The robot is the parent of the pig. Yeah? And the way that parents work is that children always inherit their properties from their parents. So they inherit some of the settings from their parents. That's why the pig was red. I'll show you again in a minute. But what that means is, right, if I were to click on my robot, right, and if I were to move my robot around, the pig follows, right? The pig's position is inherited from the robot. So it takes the robot's position and then it moves itself over from it, okay? So this pig is a child of the robot, right? So if I move this pig around on its own, it's a child, so it's not changing its parent, right? But if I move its parent around, that does change the child. Does that make sense? Yeah. The same thing is true for all of the properties. So if I were to scale it, right, the pig's scale also changes, right? If I scale it in any direction. That's why it was red too, right? Because I changed the modulation. The modulation also gets applied, right? And, there are parents and children, but I'll just show you really quickly. These two pigs are siblings, right? You can see that they're next to each other, right? These two pigs are siblings, but this pig is a child of this other pig. They're all on top of each other, unfortunately. But right, so this pig, right, we have this little baby pig. It's a child of this parent pig. And these two are siblings, right? And what that means is if I moved this pig, only its child would move, not its sibling. And if I moved the sibling, right, only the sibling moves, not these children. But if I move the robot, who's the ancestor of all of them, they all move, okay? Does that make a little bit of sense? All right, we'll pause there. And the video lecture goes further than this if you want to get a head start on the lab, but just try and start making a GitHub repository with some sprites and some nodes and see what you can get up to, okay? Reach out to me if you have any questions, submit your rules, and I'll see you all next week. Have a great week, everybody.
So for the
Yeah.
assignment, should we submit accept the rules? Should we submit the visual?
If you want to submit the visuals, that it definitely can help, but I also got a good sense of the visuals in class and I'll remember, so you can also, if you don't want to, you don't have to.
So the main one is to update the.
Yeah, mainly update the rules. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does everyone in the group need to submit or is it only one?
Let me just stop streaming.